I don't know if they learned
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Wolverine Caucus. We like to think that these forums are our opportunity to change the world, one forum, one session at a time. I'm excited that you're here today. I'm Dr. Veronica Wilkerson Johnson, and these forums are an opportunity for us to bring outstanding speakers from the University of Michigan Ann Arbor campus. Today, our speaker, who's going to talk about a topic that's becoming all too familiar in our development in education, in medicine, in business. Our speaker is going to be introduced by State Senator Hoon-Yung Hopgood. Senator Hopgood is in his second term in the Michigan Senate, and he's from the great city of Taylor, and he's an alum of the University of Michigan. Go Blue! And also we have been joined today by Representative Fran Liberetti, and I want to acknowledge that Mike Drake is here from the College of Engineering, and it's thanks to him that we have this opportunity today to learn about IBM Watson. So without further ado, I'd like to invite State Senator Hoon-Yung Hopgood to the podium. Thank you for being here today.
Well, that's all you have to do to get a smile on my face is to remind me that I am an alum of the University of Michigan and very proud of that. You know, I love coming to these forums and hearing the great speakers and the presentations. The topics are always really timely, and I think it's so true today. Just a little bit about Dr. David Chesney, and he attended the General Motors Institute, now Kettering University, as an undergrad and obtained multiple graduate degrees from Michigan State University. He worked in industry at General Motors for over 20 years prior to joining the faculty in electrical engineering and computer science at department at the University of Michigan in 2001. His research area is assistive technology, and in particular, the intersection of new technology and childhood disability. Dr. Chesney is the recipient of multiple teaching and service awards, grants, and a Best Paper Award, and he's going to be talking about IBM's Watson. And of course, that was the computer that did very, very well in Jeopardy, and talking about how that can help in the classroom and also with healing. And I don't know if this is a generational thing. If you asked me to see a robot for my treatment, I'd probably freak out. But I have a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, and they saw Big Hero 6 just a couple months ago. And if you ask them to see a robot for their care, they'd probably go up and hug it. So without further ado, I invite Dr. David Chesney to come up and give his presentation.
I'd first like to say thank you for having me today. It's a thrill to be here and a thrill to be presenting to you, and thanks for taking time out of your schedules to come. It's very nice to be here. I will get to talking about IBM Watson eventually. I'm going to talk about kind of the broader scope, and then we'll narrow in on IBM Watson as the presentation goes along, and plan to present for about 20 minutes or so. So the initiative where I'm going to start is called Gaming for the Greater Good, and this is an area that I've been working in for the past, probably approaching 10 years now at the University of Michigan. And basically what I do, what I look for in my classes is how to combine content and context, and just how to bring those together, how to marry those in my classes semester after semester. So to give a little better of a description of that, the content is the academic stuff that I need to teach. I teach 4 credit classes in the College of Engineering at the University of Michigan. And there's the content, there's the stuff that the students need to walk out of the College of Engineering knowing. But the question is how do we teach that? How do we get that across to the students? And the context that I build in the class is let's work on projects that help people in some way or another in those classes. So let's use the content that is part of the engineering content of the course. Let's help people as we deliver it, give that the context, and then marry those in my courses. So focusing first on the content, and the approach that we use in the class is, there'll be 70 students or so in a classroom, and every student in the class will come up with a proposal based upon the area that we narrow it down with, of an idea that they have that could help. We medical professionals will come in and we'll narrow it down to what we think are some of our favorite projects, okay? And then they'll pitch to the group. So say, perhaps out of this, I think there's about 40 people here, maybe 8 people would be filtered down, and they'd be the people that would pitch to the rest of the people in the room and try to recruit a team to work with them for the rest of the semester based upon the project idea that they came up with. They do requirements and design. So it's like, what is this thing going to do? Let's build it, let's shape it, let's come up with a design of what this is going to look like. They build it and then test and maintain it. So that's the content. It's the engineering process that we follow semester after semester. The context are really interesting questions that we ask at the beginning of the semester. So we might ask a question, what if a 13-year-old girl with cerebral palsy is really the world's greatest artist who can't hold a paintbrush? Okay, so what if she sees art in her head and she knows she has this art, but because of a palsy in her hand, she can't hold a paintbrush? What technology could we use to give her a paintbrush? Another type of context, and these are questions that we've tried to address in my classroom. What if a 7-year-old boy who is a quadriplegic wants to play World of Warcraft, which is a computer game? All right, and this is actually one of the things that originally inspired me in this work was a first grader who was a quadriplegic and interacted with a computer by basically they put a little metallic sticky dot on his forehead every morning. There'd be a camera on a laptop facing him, and his mouse motion would be the little bit of motion that he had in his neck, and left mouse, right mouse was sipping or puffing. So that was his total interaction with the computer. And I thought that was interesting, but I thought, perhaps we at the College of Engineering at University of Michigan could come up with something better. So it's, one of the ideas we were thinking about is what if he could use his facial motion to work like a gaming controller. So nose twitch means jump, and an ear twitch means do this, and a right eye blink means do something, and a left eye blink, and different combinations. And so that was, kind of the idea that we were trying to get moving in the class. Next one, and this is the one that focuses that's more directly related to IBM Watson that I'll get to, is how to predict if a 17-year-old patient who recently had a bone marrow transplant and is now home is going into septic shock, okay, which is a real issue. If somebody has a bone marrow transplant, they're immunodepressed, need to get them out of the hospital as quickly as possible. If they're home, how do you know whether they're getting sepsis or not? All right? And that was the project that we work on related to IBM Watson that I'll get to eventually. So worded a little bit differently, I teach classes, this Engine 100 and EECS 481, which are basically the bookends of a computer science engineering degree at the University of Michigan. One of them is first semester freshman year, and the other one is last semester senior year. Okay, so I get them right out of high school, and frankly, part of it is a recruiting tool to get them both to stay in the College of Engineering and to get them particularly interested in computer science. And then the last one is, giving them this real-world project to work on as seniors before they go off and work into industry. And I say that, we have these bright, shiny things. Okay, and the bright, shiny things are the technology that we bring into the classroom. And I always try to bring great, new, bright, shiny things into the classroom because some of the students are really intrigued just by the great, new, bright, shiny things. Whatever's the new technology that's out there on the shelf that the students want to play with. Independent of whether it helps somebody or not, they just want to play with the bright, shiny thing, okay? And some of the other students are deeply motivated by helping people with some childhood disability. They're deeply affected by this disability, and they want to help this person, help these people, independent of what technology that they're using. Okay, so we bring both of those together. And let me talk a little bit, I think I have, I have a YouTube video that I think, if it all works well. And let me preface this. This was a video that was put together based upon some projects that they did in my EECS 41 software engineering class. It was put together by the Big Ten Network, and during the basketball tournament in 2014, this is what they showed, during the little commercial snippets in between quarters and during commercials. So this was Big Ten Network about a project from my class, and I think it tells the story way better than I can. It's a 4-minute presentation, so I would like to show that to you.
Meet Grace, one of Eric and Jennifer Simmons' 4 children.
Grace is 13, and she has cerebral palsy, and she was diagnosed when she was a baby. She's got a great personality. She loves to joke. She's always got a great smile for anybody.
Grace's condition makes daily communication a challenge.
She's cognitively at grade level, but is relatively non-communicative. And by that I mean she can take things in pretty well, but she can't communicate them back out.
An enterprising group of Michigan engineering students is hoping to change that. Working in teams, these upper-level software developers are designing systems to help Grace express herself creatively, describe her emotions, and overcome the daily communication obstacles she faces.
A lot of people are doing typing sort of projects, which would allow her to do things like email or maybe even go on Facebook. And my project is focused on giving her a hobby. It's an art application. We hope that it's going to be a way for her to express her creativity and communicate with those around her through pictures.
I can't even express, the excitement of being able to be part of this. I've been very impressed with all the students and how they've really taken to her.
Dr. David Chesney's class has previously developed systems for Habitat for Humanity and people on the autism spectrum. But Grace's participation with this group enabled the students to design solutions with the unique needs of a specific individual in mind. Grace's feedback, coupled with the commitment of her parents, is integral to the design process.
Without them, I don't think we'd really be able to have a clear idea of what types of conditions we'd be designing for. Her coming here really helped us design applications that could potentially really benefit children with cerebral palsy.
The personal contact is the secret sauce. It's the magic that makes the class work. This is a senior level course. It's a 4-credit course. It has to give them some knowledge about the area of software engineering. But certainly, working with Grace and her family is what takes it above and beyond. There's a huge difference between content and context, right? And the content is the academic pieces and parts that I have to put together to call a 4-credit class at the University of Michigan. The context is what Grace brings to the class. I really think students fall in love with this area of study and this type of work because of the context.
One thing that I can really take away from this class is the power of computer science and the potential to, make the world a better place through technology. It's been a really unique experience.
The lower threshold of success is just that my students graduate and they think about these things as they go to work for the large companies. That always in the back of their minds, there's this little thing burning of, how would somebody who's differently able have access to this thing that I'm working on? And we've achieved that. And the high threshold of success is that we actually come up with a product, some software product that Grace can use. The students originally intended to build these software applications to help Grace communicate, and I think the gifts have come more greatly in the opposite direction from Grace to the students than whatever possible the students could contribute to Grace's life.
So that's the story of Grace. And we worked with her over not this most recent academic year, but the academic year beforehand. It was quite a treat for my students and to have the privilege of working with her. Let me talk a little bit about the bright, shiny things that we have in the classroom. I talked about that, a lot of students are drawn to that. And I want to make sure that we always have this great technology for my students to be able to play with. I wheel in one of those coffee carts at the beginning of the semester, and I say, these are the things you can play with. These are the toys in your sandbox for the semester, and have them kind of pick out what they want to use and what they want to play with. So over time, we've used Microsoft Kinect, which is a gaming sensor camera. We've used these Intel interactive cameras for trying to do pupil tracking. We've used wearable devices, so smartwatches, Fitbits. Anybody have a Fitbit or seen used Fitbits around? What's that? Glasses? Google Glass. Yep. Yeah, Fitbits they're like little devices that you wear that measure steps. We've played around with Google Glass, Oculus Rift. I was going to have students come up with a present, bring Oculus Rift up, but it's a virtual reality headset that you wear, that you put on, and you can build any three-dimensional world and walk around in it virtually. So all kinds of interesting technology. Makey it's this device that you can use in anything that conducts electricity. Anything that conducts electricity can be made into an input device to a computer. Okay, so Play-Doh conducts electricity. Graphite conducts electricity. So you can build an input device out of graphite by just coloring out a sheet of paper with a pencil and attaching alligator clips to it, and have a first idea of what the input device is going to look like. And then IBM Watson, and like I said, I'll get there to talking about the IBM Watson project, but just having this rich set of technology for my students to play with. And a lot of that has been generously donated from the companies. They have traditional ideas of how to use their technology. We use it differently, and so great folks at Google and Microsoft and Apple will give us technology to play with. Some of the childhood disabilities that we've addressed: autism spectrum disorder, cerebral palsy, brachial plexus palsy, bone marrow transplant, sepsis, rotator cuff surgery. I mean, this brachial plexus palsy is an interesting, it's a nerve damage caused during birth, and sometimes the kids can't reach up and kind of scratch their own ears. All right, so we develop games. The gaming for the greater good part is we try to gamify therapy so that they'll do it more. Make it fun, they'll do it more. If if someone tells you to do this 15 minutes 3 times a day, you might not do it. But if you turn it into a game somehow, and there's some motivators for it, maybe there's a chance that you'll do it more. And we also, just this past semester, we've been working on with stroke and ICU patients, of just trying to come up with, so it was the first semester that we worked with older adults rather than kids out of Mott Children's Hospital, and that was an interesting project. So context, and going back now, I'll narrow in on IBM Watson. How does one predict if a 17-year-old patient who has recently had a bone marrow transplant and is now home is going into septic shock? So the project that we worked on, and this was just last semester, was the bright, shiny thing was IBM Watson. Okay? The disability, or the illness, was having a bone marrow transplant, and we brought those together in the class trying to figure out different ways of making it work. And so the approach is that font's kind of small. I will read it to you. It says, suppose that an adolescent patient, having recently received a bone marrow transplant, is sent home from the hospital as soon as possible. Okay, and this is a situation. Bone marrow transplant, you're immunodepressed, and as you might realize, it was counterintuitive to me at first, but it makes sense now, is that the last place you want to be when you're sick is in the hospital, right? You want to get out of the hospital and get home into a nice, safe, clean environment as quickly as it's medically possible for that to happen. Okay, so patient has had a bone marrow transplant. They want to get them out of the hospital and get them home as soon as possible. Sepsis is a real concern because they're immunodepressed. They can be home. Early stages of sepsis look remarkably like a common cold. I don't know if you've known anybody who's had sepsis, but it's the symptoms. It's symptomatic of common cold, and then all of a sudden things get really bad in a hurry, like 24 to 48 hours. Okay, and then when it gets bad, it gets bad in a hurry, and it gets very serious in a hurry. So the question that we asked in the class is, can the patient have smart wearables, so wear smart devices, and be passively monitored, again, bright, shiny things, to predict early onset of sepsis? And so putting the, changing the green to the devices that we used. Can the patient wear smart clothes and devices that interface with IBM Watson to predict sepsis? And the smart devices were things, again, like smart watches that are measuring heartbeat and respiration, sleep patterns. One of the student groups wanted to buy what is perhaps the most expensive Under Armour ever made. It was a $600 t-shirt. So I had to get a grant in order to buy this t-shirt, all right? And it was a t-shirt that's monitored up. It has different sensors on it where it's measuring respiration, and you get this graphic of your lungs, expanding and contracting, and just tons and tons of data off of this very expensive t-shirt. And I thought, well, we'll give it a try. We'll see how it works, okay? And smartwatch, different devices. And then we interface it with IBM Watson to see what IBM Watson would do with it. And the whole point was to predict sepsis. And the idea is we're looking for trends. Is a sleep pattern getting wonky? Is something going on, is their heart rate going up noticeably at certain times of day? Is it noticeably going down? Is there some patterns that we're looking for? Okay, and so that was the whole point, is to gather up all of this data from a patient who's had a bone marrow transplant to see if we can predict if they're going into septic shock. And what we found out, and this is a very interesting conclusion, and for those of you who might be considering using IBM Watson, is that IBM Watson is much better at unstructured data, and I say think Jeopardy, than it is at structured data, as in big data analytics, okay? And how many of you saw Jeopardy fans? And right, the brand identification that we have with IBM Watson was it beating Ken Jennings on Jeopardy so many years ago. And if you think about the type of data that was there, it was unstructured data. And unstructured data is things like novels and books and encyclopedias, right? I mean, it's unstructured. You're searching through massive amounts of data that's in kind of free form to try to come up with the answer to a problem, right? That's unstructured data. The thing that we try to do is we have structured data. And if you think of structured data, that's like a big Excel spreadsheet, okay? The questions that were asked of Watson on Jeopardy were not questions like, what is the average age in the United States at this second? I mean, that's a huge structured data problem. Look through, figure out birth dates of everybody, figure out the date, do average. That's a structured data problem, right? And at this time, when we worked on this project, we made the wrong assumption. We assumed that we would be able to have all of this data coming off of all of these devices and do a data analysis, big data analytics on all this data, and come up with some clever predictors of when somebody was going into sepsis. And that's not what IBM Watson is good at. It's good at unstructured data. It's good at Wikipedia entries. It's good at, what's the name of the third musketeer in the first book on the Three Musketeers. I mean, that's unstructured. It has to look through, okay, what's a musketeer? Okay, who wrote the book on musketeers? Okay, what's the first chapter say? Does it mention the first name? Does it mention the second name? Does it mention the third name? Boom, I've got it. That's the type of unstructured data. So the reason that I'm bringing this up is and I need to admit this, right, is that we used a wonderful tool on the wrong problem. Okay, we used a screwdriver for a problem that we needed a chisel, right? So we tried to use IBM Watson for big data analytics, and it didn't succeed there. It was very good for unstructured data, not very good for structured data. So a question that I have is, what's going to go on next for us? What is going to be our next new technology, our next bright shiny thing, and the green box, and what's going to be our next disability? And that's what I do during the summers, is try to figure that out. I have the privilege of working with folks from U of M Health Systems and with different doctors, and I found consistently that any doctor with pediatric before the title of their name, they're always pleasant to work with. They're just, it's their nature that they are just wonderful people to work with. So I'll be working with some pediatric specialists in something, trying to identify a problem. We'll be looking around for whatever the latest, greatest technology is, whatever the latest, greatest, bright, shiny thing is, and we'll narrow that down and figure it out by the fall, and that will be what the students work on in the fall of 2015. This is interesting, and I wanted to bring this up, okay, is part of the reason that I originally started doing this, I am the father of 3 daughters, okay? And I've taught summer camps for the University of Michigan, and I've been involved in trying to draw more women into STEM fields ever since I've been teaching at the University of Michigan. by the simple fact that I have 3 daughters, okay? And there's been some fairly significant research that shows that if you want to draw more women into STEM fields, context is very important, okay? That you learn the different areas of engineering because of what you can do with it, not necessarily because of what's interesting about that technology, okay? And I wanted to point out like these statistics right here. In computer science, and I think this is a national statistic right now, that women in computer science right now are somewhere between 10 and 15% at the university level. Okay, and that's a fairly consistent statistic across the country. And in my classes, you know, especially lately, you can see, you know, in general a ramp up. Don't think, but it goes from, you know, around 10% back in fall of '09 to around a third of the students in the class are female in this freshman class. And I think that's fairly indicative and fairly hopeful that, you know, if we can use technology, use context to get a more varied workforce, particularly in computer science, then I think that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. So just in summary, purpose of education is to teach the content. I mean, you can't get a college degree for being a nice person, right? I mean, we give a college degree for earning the content that says, I understand this material, I have mastered this material. But maybe there are ways to do it differently. And the way that I do it differently is to try to have this steady context of interesting projects that help people semester after semester. So thank you again for allowing me to present during your lunchtime, and I'll handle any questions and answers that you might have. Thank you. Yes?
What did you do with all those data that didn't work out? That your shiny thing didn't work out?
So, in the presentation about grace, it's our low threshold is that the students in the class are just thinking about the stuff. You know, they're thinking about how to help people. And in my mind, that's success. We never, this sounds kind of odd, but we never really did any of this with the hopes of wildly succeeding and coming up with the new device. I mean, it was just the threshold was, let's have the students think about it. And then we had some students that like batted it out of the park. And this is due to the, you know, the excellence of the students at the College of Engineering at the University of Michigan, where the first time we ever did this, one of the student groups won all of these national and international awards and won grant money and things like that. And we were kind of victims of our own success, where we had to figure out what to do to build the machinery around, you know, continuing this on. So right now, and this is, you know, partially sponsored by the Mott Golf Classic, we're in the process of building a nonprofit so that these devices, these inventions can continue on after the students leave and go to work at wonderful companies like Apple and Google and Microsoft, or as an alternative, they can stay and continue working on the project. I've had some students that have stayed and continued working on the projects and just said, you know, I'm not so interested in working in industry. This thing has really drawn my heart in, and I'd like to continue working on this. And then we can use wonderful, you know, the advantage of the Center for Entrepreneurship through the University of Michigan and just come up with different mechanisms to allow and encourage the students to continue development. There's a question. Yes?
You said that the female population went from about 8 to 30, but that was the first year class.
Yes.
How does that seem to be going for the seniors?
So that's another topic of research. Actually, that's a paper that I want to write. Is, you know, it's one of those things where I've put these numbers together for this presentation, and then that is a question that's crossed my mind is you know, how does that look from a senior perspective? And give me half a year and I'll answer that question. But I think that is absolutely valid. You know, it's like you can get people hooked on something, right? But can you keep them in the program, and are they staying in there? So that's a really, really valid question that I don't have an answer to right now. Yes?
Do you repeat challenges? I mean, you say every year you look for the new latest thing to work on, but previous ones haven't been complete successes. Don't you re-offer those as a...
So a good yes. Short answer is yes. Longer answer is particularly related to Grace, the young lady who was in the video. She was involved during our fall semester, all right? And her parents were actively involved, and she came down to our classroom to work with the students about a half a dozen times during the semester. And her parents were, her father in particular was fortunately self-employed, so could adjust his own schedule. They live in the Lansing area, so he could adjust their own schedule such that they could drive down to University of Michigan half a dozen times during the semester. So around Thanksgiving, I said, you know, this is clearly working out very well, but it's also a burden upon your family. You know, do you want to continue for winter semester? You know, I needed to know around Thanksgiving so I could start thinking about what I'm going to do, if not this, during winter semester. And they were all in. So they wanted to stay involved, so they were involved for a whole academic year. So, you know, it typically, I try to do it on a whole academic year because it's really hard over, you know, between Thanksgiving and Christmas coming up with a new idea for the subsequent semester. So I typically try to do it on an academic year basis. The freshman level class, the Engine 100 level class, we almost always focus on autism. So focus on issues related to autism spectrum disorder, just because that's, you know, a lot of students in the classroom have been directly affected by that, and by that, you know, they have a cousin or a sibling, or, you know, that's somewhere on the spectrum. And so that's pretty consistent in there, that in Engine 100, we always do autism spectrum disorder. And then at the end of the semester, we always move those games over to Mott Children's Hospital, to the rehabilitation labs. Yes?
Do you have any insights about how something like Watson could be or is likely to be integrated into like neighborhood clinics as a diagnostic tool or that sort of thing? You know, crystal ball, where do you think the role of that technology is?
I think it has great potential. Right, and because that's a type of unstructured, you know, you have a whole bunch of very in-depth medical articles, right? And you know, 100 or 1,000. I don't know how doctors keep up, really, on new medicines. You know, how much time a medical doctor would have to put up just reading to stay on top of the literature. So I don't know if I'd ever see it as a surrogate, you know, ever as instead of, but I could see it as an aid. You know, that I'm a medical doctor and I need to look something up, something new, and that, you know, somewhere out there, there's this set of unstructured data, these research papers on the latest, you know, medical research in this particular area. So setting IBM Watson loose on this to try to narrow it down, to come up with, you know, level of confidence. I'm 84% that this is true. I don't know that it's ever going to be the mainstream specific solution. You know, that it's going to be there instead of, just because of, you know, liability issues. I mean, I just can't imagine that someone would say, you know, just type in what you think is wrong, and here we'll give you a diagnosis, and as a ticket thing does at the airport, it prints out a prescription so that you can go to Meyer and get you. I don't see that.
I guess just to follow on, the one model that's been discussed is you'd have a nurse practitioner, or you know, somebody advanced education but not MD, and then who's listening to your symptoms, and then with the Watson.
That I would believe. I mean, I could buy that as being a possibility, but I just think there needs to be, you know, the human filter who knows things other than what you can type in on a keyboard. Does that address your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Yes.
Mainly your product of a successful project would be software.
Yes.
Is it also hardware? Do you develop hardware to do the work?
Yes. In fact, we develop hardware to work that makey where we can do like first approximations of input devices. We've just purchased our own 3D printer so that we can you know, come up with a design and then actually, you know, print it out of little plastic nodules. And that's one of the things that I'm going to work on this summer, is learning how to use a 3D printer. Can I tell you a leading contender for a project this fall? Okay, and this is one of those that we're working on. Are you interested? Is that all right? So there's a childhood, and I don't know, debilitation where the chest is either concave, it's way caved in, or convex, where it's too far out. And there's, you know, some small percentage of kids who have this. And essentially, I believe the medical approach to this is basically they open up the child's chest, they break the ribs, and then they put either some kind of compression device on or some kind of scaffolding to hold the chest out so that the bones will heal in the right way. Okay, and it's very interesting. So the project, and I've been working with some pediatric surgeons on the idea of this, there's a device that you can plug into your iPad, and you can walk it around somebody, and it comes up with a 3D model of that person. Okay, so you could actually, if you think about this, you could take this camera, stick it in your iPad, walk it around yourself, or have somebody walk it around you, and then if you had access to a 3D printer, you could build a bust of yourself to put on the mantle of your fireplace. All right? So I mean, that's kind of how this technology works, right? So what we're thinking about doing with this is, walking it around the torso of the child, and then building the three-dimensional model of the torso of the child, figuring out how the scaffolding would work, and coming up with a device, independent. The child can go home. We can come up with all of this stuff based upon this plastic thing that we built in our 3D printer, and then when they come back in, we have the device and the scaffolding all set up. So that's one of the ideas that we're working on as well. How would that work? So, yes?
I'm one of those 10% women you talk about. In 1980s, I was a woman in the engineering world, and then they were bringing computers, and I left and went into the medical alternative health world, only to study the electrical, mechanical, and chemical engineering of the body. I see the body as a computer. I've been taught, and I'm the one that was in the ICU and dealing with the stroke people. My specialty is seniors, okay? You work with kids, I work with seniors. From my education I got through the university, I got to present here at one of your health deals, a lot of years ago. Anyways, if the body worked like the educational system, we'd be all in real bad shape, because the communication between the people who know the information is not being passed. The physicists aren't passing it to the medical guys who are getting their research grants off of the drug community don't want to know that the energetics of the body, they already know it. So there's no communications between the people that should know better. And as far as I can see, they should be teaching these young kids what I know so that they could be this. They should be questioning me, because your people don't want what my people know to work, because we'll save them billions of dollars. And it's all about dollars, the grants, and that's just the reality of things.
So one way that we're trying to address that to some degree at the University of Michigan and the College of Engineering is through what's called the Multidisciplinary Design Program. And multidisciplinary design, I mean, to your point, I don't think interesting engineering problems happen in the silo of a single discipline. And so the multidisciplinary design is, let's look at this problem, and let's bring in different colleges, different departments, and let's work on this together to try to come up with the ultimate solution that answers it from both perspectives. So as an example, last semester I worked on a project with the School of Art and Architecture, where there's an art and architecture prof who wanted to build these big three-dimensional sculptures using this knitting machine that's probably about as long as one of these tables, and it just prints out different textures of knitted material. And he's explaining it to me, and he wants to build a three-dimensional sculpture that's about as big as half of this room for kids to interact with. And he's explaining it to me, and I'm an engineer, and so I'm kind of going like this, but I'm thinking, I just didn't quite understand what he was trying to explain. But then he said, the reality is the catalyst for this project is my 5-year-old daughter, who is very significantly on the autism spectrum. Okay? And if I build this device, and if we sew in metallic threads, and we attach it to a makey-makey, like I was talking about earlier, could you build software that this thing could drive? Okay, so picture a sculpture that it's this thing that's this knitted sculpture, and I can't even explain it. I think I have a short video, but you touch on it, and you push on it, and you tug on it, and the lights go up and down, and the lights turn blue, and nice music comes up and goes down, and a fan maybe blows in your face or stops going out. And he asked if my students could build the software to drive the mechanisms. I was like, yeah, sure. So I mean, that's one of those things, that's one of those projects that's just kind of this bizarrely cool, interesting intersection of art and architecture and engineering. And I'm all for that. And I think there's a lot of room for those intersections. And I think that, you know, like I said, that the multidisciplinary design program in the College of Engineering helps to try to make that happen.
You have all the data in your body. Your muscular structure tells what's happening going in your DNA and your mind science of who you are. So you can go over your body and your electrical system and it'll tell you where you are. You can go in and defrag it so it no longer is going to be there because we operate just like a drone.
Yes?
I would just like to add something here to this wonderful lecture that you've given. Information that people might be interested in. In the latest Smithsonian, there is a complete coverage of a lot of the things that they're doing with some of the techniques you mentioned. But it's just amazing, the whole issue. I would hardly recommend Smithsonian for this month. It kind of being mailed. I haven't had time to go through it because it just came. But it's a lot about some of the things we've talked about here.
In what magazine is that? Smithsonian?
The Smithsonian.
Very good. Thank you.
I don't know how many subscribe to it, but you might, I don't know if this is ever on the newsstand or not, but you might like to try to.
I'll try to find it. I'll try to find it this evening. Thank you.
Yeah, get it at a library. I'm a librarian, so everything.
Okay. Thank you for that recommendation. Yes?
It seems to me if you're serious, and you are serious, it's obvious, about your contextual portion of your input, you're going to be multidisciplinary.
Oh, yeah.
You have to be. I don't know, and that's an important key point to what
Yep.
I think you presented.
And the students, you know, I mean, the students have done, you know, woodshop work coming up with first approximations. You know, I talked about the makey-makey, which is to me, you know, it ends up being the centerpiece because it allows you to make anything into an interface into the software. And a funny little story. Do I have time for a funny little story? Okay. But you know, a funny little story is, so my students will oftentimes use Play-Doh to come up with the first approximations of their input device. You know, it's like, let's just build it out of, you know, let's like little balls of Play-Doh, and we've got a red and a green and a blue and a yellow. And then you stick an alligator clip inside, okay? And so they had these 4 different balls basically for Grace to use when she came into class, just to see if, you know, the colors would work, or, you know, whether shapes are more important, if you make it a cube or a triangle or whatever. And all engineering students know, I think, like deep down in their soul, is that you never mix the colors of Play-Doh. This is what's been drilled into their heads for years, since they were 4 years old, right? Engineers, it's just, I think it's against their nature to mix the colors of Play-Doh. So Grace comes in and she grabs a hold of 2 balls and she like scrunches them together into one big ball. And there was a palpable sigh in the room of all the students. Their stress level goes up and you hear it. I mean, it was amazing, right? And that was what they were focused on, is they were looking at these balls of Play-Doh that were mushed together. And immediately when Grace was done, they started picking apart the colors to get them in the right containers afterwards. So it was quite funny.
She knew.
Grace was the artist. Yep. She wanted to put the colors together. Yes.
In any one semester's class, how many students do you have at one time? Senior class?
In the senior level class right now, there's typically 70 per semester, and there's 50 on the wait list.
So you boil that down to just one project?
15 projects. We typically have somewhere between 15 to 20 groups. Usually it's pretty close to 15.
Well, that's why I wondered. There are multiple projects.
Oh, yeah.
Every,
Yep. Yeah, those pitches at the beginning, the students will come up with pitches.
You rate them A, B, C, D.
Well, I mean, I have medical professionals look at them. You know, we look at them from the instructor standpoint. Is this doable within the scope of a semester? And we try to come up with, you know, what our best are. And then
It's pretty hard for you to keep up with.
yeah, it is, but But you can tell, I mean, you can tell a good idea. And some of the ideas have like a big wow factor, but they're not very practical. And some of them are very practical, but there's no wow factor. And so we're looking at for kind of the intersection of that. So an example, one of the projects that worked best for Grace was turning it was a Microsoft Surface into a universal remote to work in her house. Okay, so it would work her stereo, her television, her lights, ceiling fan, thermostat. And that's not a huge wow factor project, but it's really, really practical for her. And that was, frankly, one of the biggest, most beneficial projects was that one in particular.
So you had multiple projects working on Grace's condition problem.
Yeah, and it was broad. It's like, Grace came in, introduced herself, and so some of the students worked on ways to help her play the game Sorry or Battleship at her school in her classroom. Because she can't, because of her palsy, she can't reach the little pegs and move the little pegs around. So and that was, so they had to come up with big pegs, thus the Play-Doh, right? So they're coming up, all different kinds of things. It's like, here's meet Grace, let's learn about Grace, let's understand Grace, let's see how she uses her motorized wheelchair to get an idea of what her gross and fine motor skills are. And then, Parker Brothers got involved and they gave us a box full of games for the students to play with, to think about, and one of the students, we had like I said, a Surface RT, and they used the Surface to try to come up with, ways of controlling her environment. And so it was narrowed a little bit by Grace, but then it was broadened by here's all this different technology, come up with a good idea. Yes?
How many universities are working on this?
I know of at least one. I don't know. The social context, I know there's a program at Purdue called EPICS, but they work, more, and this is kind of where I started, working more on kind of general social good. Let's build a handicap ramp for a house. Those type of projects. And that's kind of where we started in here is I think it was mentioned in the video, but one of the earlier projects that we did was inventory control for Habitat for Humanity. Right, so that's kind of broad-based, not medically directed. And then, we thought, well, we've got this great medical school that's, a half mile away. And I was introduced to some of the doctors and some of the nurses, and they started coming up with some problems that we could perhaps address. And so that's when we narrowed it down. And then, like I said, I've just found that pediatric doctors are always very pleasant to work with. And it's like, they'll give their time, they're caring, they have good personalities to work with, they work well with my students and stuff, so that's part of it. And frankly, working with pediatric patients is a great motivator for the students. They see that, and it's like they can relate to that very well.
Dr. Chesney, on behalf of the Wolverine Caucus and the UM Alumni Association, I'd like to give you this pen as a token of our esteem. And it is a Wolverine Caucus lapel pin, so it's beautiful gold and represents how much we appreciate you being here today. This is really interesting. How many of you feel more comfortable with technology and the future as a result of this presentation? Please join me in thanking Dr. Chesney. I know I want one of those Apple iPad apps that you mentioned. So, as you know, these forums are brought to you by the UM Alumni Association and the Office of the Vice President for Government Relations. We have our State Relations Director here, Rebecca DeVoot, and we have Kirk Lutz here from the UM Alumni Association. So again, we appreciate that support. And our next Wolverine Caucus Forum is going to be on September 23rd. That's Wednesday, September 23rd, featuring our head softball coach, Carol Hutchins. So we look forward to seeing you at that time right back here at the Christman Building. And I want to wish you a fantastic summer and a healthy summer. And go blue.
Thank you.